So Tim, how you going?
Good. I'm going well, Romain. How are you?
Very well. How's your morning been?
Not too bad, mate. Quick matter on in court, and we'll be here for sufficient time for me to get to a gig later on.
Yeah. What gig are you going to?
What is it tonight? John Garcia, mate, the voice of Caius.
So, good afternoon, everyone. We have Tim Graham, partner at HWL Lawyers. Tim's been a beautiful old young friend of mine since I was, I think, 9 years old. Dalacombe Park Career Club days when he used to come in and steam in and bowl very quick. Well, a lot of people probably want to remember that and probably want to know that information about you. But Tim, thank you so much for joining us today, mate. I really appreciate you giving us your time and your busy schedule to come on board.
Mate, it's my pleasure and honour. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on this podcast. I'm sure I was more beautiful in those days, yet you've remained equally beautiful, mate. So my felicitations to you for that also.
I think it's all genetics, Tim.
Well,
it's all genetics.
that may be so, mate. There wasn't too many quicker than me, but if your father was in the conversation, and no doubt so are you these days, mate.
So tell me a bit about yourself, Tim. I think when I first met you, you were playing cricket and we're down in the Mornington Peninsula at Dalacombe Park Career Club. And tell me a bit about your history and your sporting background.
Yeah, well, mate, that's a long time ago, isn't it? But cricket was actually my secondary thing. Soccer was the thing I was supposed to take seriously, and I played at representative levels at state and made a national squad in soccer. But soccer's winter and it meant travel and whatever, whereas cricket's sort of local and summer and everything associated.
Yeah.
So I sort of got exponentially keener on the cricket as it went on. Unfortunately, wasn't quite as good at it, mate. I might have sent them down quick, but that's not to say anything about their direction.
So you played up front soccer, or did you play midfield? Or
played in the middle, believe it or not. And I remember you played soccer yourself back in the day, mate. But it's football now for you. You play well.
It's funny, you actually, the Yo family, Andrew, I played a bit of football with him. You're still close with his dad. So he was my coach, my soccer coach back in the day. Yeah,
he was. I remember that, and he always spoke very well of you. I mean, as does everyone, obviously. But he was a big fan of yours.
I was a right back in the day, so shout out to.
That's probably why he understood it.
Yeah. He understood the passion of a footballer / athlete, thinking that we're all gods at one particular stage.
Mate, indeed, and you've changed. You've gone to the dark side now.
I've definitely gone to the dark side, playing AFL football, not at an AFL club, but Australian rules football. So loved it. It's actually kind of funny. I actually think playing sports gave me a real understanding of human beings and what we do and how we react under pressure. And you learn so much from some people in various situations through sporting environments. So what's your thoughts on that?
No doubt about it. I remember it was put to me at some representative session when I was perhaps 12 or something, and the coach said that the friends you make through sport are the strongest lifelong friends you'll ever make. And I reckon that's true. I mean, it's not to dilute friendships you make in other spheres of life, but when you've got a commonality of, the exertion that you put in and the strain and the pressure and whatever, it gives you a certain commonality with people that you don't share, outside that. So I absolutely agree, no doubt.
So you're playing Dalacombe Park, I think it was early 2000s. I was there, you were there from when, 90s?
No, mate, I was... So I started soccer when I was 4 at the same club, or the same oval anyway.
Yeah.
Cricket, I was a late starter. I think I was about 10, so that takes us to 1984.
Wow, beautiful. Yeah. And you were opening batsman, bowler.
Yeah, I was.
we did everything back then until we realised.
Not to say we're any good at it, mate, but at least we tried.
Yeah. So you still catch up with a lot of people from the cricket club and a lot of friends. When's the last time you saw them?
Look, mate, it sort of fortifies the comment you just made. It's less frequent. I'm living uptown now, and Frankston's 50k down the road, so you certainly see people less, but it doesn't change the fundamental fibre of the friendship. So Chris Brattain was a good mate of mine. You'll remember Christopher.
What a batsman, bowler!
Yeah,
Jesus Christ,
still is, mate. And
what a rig!
Yeah, all that. I'm not going to tell him that you've said that. He'll have to click on for himself. Anyway, he had his 40th on New Year's Eve. Yeah. So occasions like that, you catch up with a lot of dudes, and it's awesome. It just takes it back. The fact that you might not have seen them for 3 or 5 or more years, it just doesn't change the fundamental substance of the friendship.
Yeah, I think I've still, obviously through social media, you still sort of have an understanding of what people are doing with their lives and seeing them grow from myself. I know the kids that I played under 11s, 12s cricket with to where they are now. It's an amazing journey, and it's probably one place, and I've always said that I'll go back and play cricket. I will go back there at one particular stage. I don't know when, or I don't want to give a time frame because obviously I play cricket at Moorabbin Cricket Club in the sub-district comp, but I always will give back to Dalcombe Park because they gave me a lot, and a lot of people invested time. And as I said, I was pretty much a little rat bag thinking I was the best cricketer on earth. And then they were really accepting of my family and my culture and really welcoming. I still remember playing in the ones, and just for them supporting me and getting around me and protecting me in that environment. I'll always have a lot of respect for people involved with that club, and they told me when I did wrong, and they also told me when I did right, and I just have this beautiful connection to that club. I'll always have.
Mate, I reckon you've hit the nail on the head. It's something that the club has done well for a long time and continues to do well from what I can see. I mean, I'm pretty distant now, but you get some sort of perspective from social media, I suppose. It's got its pros and cons. Yeah. A strength is that you do get that remote optics or visibility of stuff. I mean, it's not intimate, it's not direct, but it keeps you apprised in a certain way. But mate, you were very well regarded down there. I'm pleased to hear you talk well of the club, and I'll have to get them to start getting your contract ready, because we were saying before we came on air, mate, the last time I think we saw you, I tried to bribe you to come and play for the club with a dinner and a cricket bat or something, and we didn't manage to secure your autograph, so...
That's because it was. I think we went to McDonald's, and I'm a vegetarian. No, joking. I appreciate everything you guys have always done. So, Tim, tell me a bit about yourself. So, you work in the legal field. We're at now HWL. How did you get into the legal field? Did you know that you were going to be a lawyer from high school?
Mate, I'm an interesting one. My earliest, I can remember. I'm in grade 1, so I suspect that makes me 6 years old. I'm driving my red Mongoose BMX down Foot Street, Frankston, with a mate. And
no helmet on, probably.
No helmet on, mate. No. And,
no one had helmets back then.
They still should.
We did some shit then.
Yeah. Anyway, and so he goes, what do you want to be when I grow up? I said, lawyer. And it's something that, I don't know if it's a benefit, that it's all I've ever wanted to do. I don't know if that's a benefit, because, so many people in life end up just sort of falling into what they do, and it's, almost by default rather than by design.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's beneficial insofar as, I had a goal and I achieved it. The corollary of that might be, well, I was a slave to this proposition and I never looked sideways. But anyway, mate, I've been practicing I'm in my 22nd year now, so time flies.
Yeah, wow. So you went to, which high school did you go to?
Went to Haileybury, mate, so private school. But
private school boy,
I was
life
always,
with luxury.
I'm glad you said boy, mate. Back in those days, they used different euphemistic, adjectives for private school attendees. It was good. It was like you, mate. I've always sort of had a fair bit of diversity, and a lot of different areas. The sport and professional, and music and whatever. Yeah. And I think that's sort of a manifestation of one. Private school. Get most of my closest mates were Frankston cats that lived locally, went to the high school. That's where I spent my time, dude. So it's good to be diverse, isn't it?
It's amazing. Amazing country and state we live in within Australia. Like, you meet so many people from so many different walks of life, and through those interactions, like you sort of understand where people come from and what makes them so unique. And obviously you went to Haileybury and then you obviously went to university, and I'm sure you would have met a lot of people. When you went to university, how did you actually get into university for starters, and what university did you go to that then you went, okay, I want to work within the property development industry, the construction industry? Like how did that come about?
So straight to Monash, and Monash Law School in the 90s, mate. My classmates were rolling up with, Hugo Boss shirts and Vuitton bags, and I was there in dreadlocks and board shorts and flannies, mate.
So you had dreadlocks back in the day?
Yeah, I did. Although mine just happened organically. I didn't have mine crafted. Anyway, and it's gone from the top to the mandible now. But anyway, so mate, pretty boring story in a sense. I never sort of took a gap year. I got a lot of mates that did the London thing and what have you. And when we catch up, it's a funny conversation because they're it's humbling, but they're quite effusive in praising me for what I've done, but I'm equally the same thing back to them, and it's different people do different things. So for me it was just this linear high school, uni, work, and then sort of once you're advancing in your profession, it's away you go. Yeah. Whereas their stories are more interesting with travel and all that, and so I've got as much respect for them as they share with me generously. But I think the other thing that comes out of the conclusion of those discussions when we have them, we're usually a couple of pots in, admittedly, but I reckon we'd all do exactly the same thing again. Yeah. There's not one of my sort of close circle that, no regrets is an easy thing to say, but honestly, I reckon the pattern would fundamentally be exactly the same for each one of them.
So you, while studying, you played sports and were you working at the same time, or was you studying, trying to balance that social aspect and obviously that financial aspect, which is critical for a lot of uni students?
I was heavily weighted towards the social aspect, Romain. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that.
I think we both were. We both are.
That's a good one. Yeah. But so no, look, I was very well supported by a very generous mother. I didn't work at Macca's and that sort of thing. I was pretty full up otherwise, but soccer paid the bills to an extent. It's sort of semi-professional, and then that just sort of went through with the slog. But I was admitted to practice at the age of 24, so I was.
Straight out of uni, straight into practice.
Straight, yeah.
And you didn't transition to go over, like a lot of people maybe when they're at uni, they'll finish uni and they might have 3 or 4 months. They might go to Asia or go to Bali or go overseas. You went straight into it.
I did, mate. It's a pretty boring story, as I said. And in fact,
it's fucking ambitious, man. Like that's you basically saying, I know what I want to do and I'm going to do it now. I'm not going to take a path of everyone else.
That's my story, in fairness. It strikes me, mate, that if I knew you were going to ask me to tell you about my childhood, I should be lying down rather than sitting up. But anyway, here we go.
I studied engineering, not psychology, by the way, everyone.
I know you did, and you're just about to finish your masters.
Yeah, masters. Wow, it's been such an interesting ride because I went from being in high school and fucking hating it. Like I generally didn't enjoy high school too much. I just felt like everyone had the same method of thinking. They had the same way of resolving a problem, and I always looked at it differently. I always looked at things coming from the South American heritage and growing up in Linden, Guyana, and then moving to Australia, migrating to Australia when I was 8 years old. I got a really good understanding of diversity and diverse culture, and coming up with, like saying before to off air, was that I caught a boat to school. Like in order to get from my house to school, we'd cross a river, jump in the boat, and we'd probably walk 3 or 4 kilometers. And when school finished, we did the same. And so, like, there was issues around, like, when the boats aren't running, how do we get home? We'd go stay at a family friend's house. So if there was an issue there was a bridge that we had to cross a few kilometers down. But when the bridge wasn't working, and when I'm talking a bridge, I'm not talking about the West Gate or the Balti Bridge where it's safe. It's talking about trucks can't go across it, cars can't go across it for lengthy periods of time. So just a different way of thinking. So when I got into high school, I just felt like everyone thought the same, so didn't really enjoy it. And then I decided that I was going to go across to England and play cricket. And then, I would say the United Kingdom. I went to Wales and played cricket in this little place called Llandudno and loved it. Completely enjoyed my time there. Lived on Cwlac Road, which is located in the northern region of Wales, and played cricket there and won a premiership and did all that, and then ventured across to the Caribbean, where I spent, I think it was like 8 months playing cricket in my hometown and trying to make a living playing cricket and follow my dreams and play for the West Indies. And it didn't quite work out, and so I spent another season or two in England and came back to Australia and played a lot of cricket. And it was through that experience that made me want to be an engineer, and through seeing how poor infrastructure is for the developing world actually took a big impact on me. And I probably get a little bit emotional about it because I see people that have died because they don't have running water, or they don't have enough accessibility to medicine and through food, and that's only because we didn't have the infrastructure. You don't have the proper roads necessarily to get them the help that they need. So when I realised that I wasn't going to play international cricket, not many people know this about me. I came back and I was like, I fucking can't just sit around doing nothing. And what I mean by nothing, I'm not just talking about sitting on a couch. I mean by not pursuing a career that can make a difference in someone else's life and make a difference to my community and my culture. So I went to uni. At the time I was working for, I think it was the NAB, and I was enjoying it. It was good. It was fine. It paid the bills, but I knew that's not what I wanted to do for the long term. So I ended up going to Victoria University and applying to their civil engineering course. And it was a mid-semester intake through the middle of winter. And at this time I had a young daughter with my partner at the time, and we were sort of saying what do I want to do and how do I want to go about this? And I just said, fuck it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I balanced young family with engineering, with cricket in the summer, football in the winter, and it was a great time for me. It was stressful, don't get me wrong. It was really stressful trying to balance all that. And then a little funny story came about where I was like, okay, you're doing all this. It's really hard to support a family doing all this. How are you going to change? What do you got to do? So I came up with a concept with a friend of mine to open up a Caribbean restaurant in Yarraville called Baxford Co at the time. And it was great. And it sort of had that entrepreneurial sort of background and sort of got me thinking of how to create income in order to follow your dreams in another path. So throughout my uni degree, I did that and started little businesses and companies, and I just went about it in a different way. So when I finally finished that, I worked for approximately a year and saw a lot of things within the industry where I thought I wasn't quite sure I understood it all. And I was a little bit uneducated in some areas, and a massive thing was creating sustainable communities. So when we're designing as an engineer, as a property developer, whatever you are, I was like, how can we make a difference from a social point of view, from an environmental point of view, from an economical point of view? And then I realized that in order to make a change, you have to tick all those three boxes. So that made me go to Monash University, studying infrastructure, and I've got one more subject to do, and I'm done. And it's funny, I'm taking an extra subject because I want to start. The subject is leadership and trying to understand what it is to be a really good leader. So my pathway into the professional world has been a little bit different. So much like yourself, I done it in a different way. I knew exactly what I wanted to do once I did it, and I just fucking put my head down and worked. So 8 years without a holiday or doing anything. I just worked, and that was it.
You covered a lot of ground there, mate. But, and I certainly don't purport or aspire to be an expert on the education system either then or now, but I understand incisively when you sort of say how homogenising the structure was.
Yep.
I'm often asked, would you send your kids to Haileybury or to a private school? And I still don't know the answer. I haven't had kids, so I haven't had to have the traction of an answer. But the way I usually respond to that is, look, I think there is a certain advantage that private school education gives you. I think the median of a private school is typically a little bit in front of the median of a government school, but That's about it, man. There's going to be facilities and this sort of stuff, but at the end of the day, if you're driven to do something, it doesn't mean jack shit where you went to school, in my opinion. As far then, once your career gets going, I think the way that you describe your approach, and I know it's your style anyway, but that, you know, it's not cookie cutter, it's not myopic, you know, you're looking laterally and whatever. And I think in any profession, the difference between being, you know, competent and serviceable, another word for those things might be mediocre, is to, you know, just sort of tread the same path or whatever.
Correct. Yeah.
There's an element. One of the things that attracted me, you know, that I really draw out of the law is being creative.
Yeah.
And
which creativity is so subjective, like it's complete subjective. Like,
sure, but you've got to. I mean, if I'm just going and doing the same thing that every cat's done before me, I mean, what am I achieving? It's a foregone conclusion.
You're
just close to. You've got to
you're baking a cake, then, really. You just,
precisely, mate. So, and it's certainly true of, you know, construction. Every element I would have thought of the construction industry, but I think the difference between, you know, being, and I say it with respect, you know, there's some, you know, very solid, robust, obdurate people that, you know, that'll just get it done. They're reliable or whatever, but you know that has its limitations. If you're prepared to sort of take a bit of a risk and, you know, look at doing things differently or whatever you want, I mean, only if you give yourself that liberty and opportunity are you putting yourself in a position to achieve something novel and therefore brilliant.
Yeah, I've found, like, in the last few years, something that I've learned, I think I've valued other people's opinion way too much. And if someone's listened to this, like, if you understand your path and understand where you want to get to, you have to be able to block that outside noise off. It's good to take people's opinion on board and listen to them, and
listen to it. I don't mean to cut across. I'm agreeing with you. You listen to everyone. Everyone.
Correct.
The highest and lowest. If I could put it coarsely that way, you listen, and then you make up your own view, and that's what
exactly right. Yeah. And it was funny. I think I made a post the other day where it's like, I was saying about being successful. My definition of success is going to be determined by my level of happiness. And it was really important that everyone don't chase, obviously, something else that someone's put before them. Understand what you want to do, understand how that is going to make you happy, and try to strive towards that. But in order to be successful, I think you've got to be able to block out that positive feedback and negative feedback a little bit. If you invest too much on those positive reinforcements that everyone gives you, sometimes I've noticed within people is like when they do get that negative feedback, they don't know what to do. They're so crippled by someone else's opinion because they've overvalued that positive opinion or feedback too much. So it's kind of crazy. Do you see that within your industry quite a lot?
Well, firstly, I'm just going to agree with you on general principle that if you put weight on if you put too much weight on positive feedback, you're going to put too much weight on negative feedback, and that's not, you know, the effective way of actualisation, in my view. I'm not a psychologist any more than you are, but just on the basis of anecdotal experience, personal experience, it seems to me that, you know, you're humble in winning and losing, and sport analogies come back.
Sport's perfect for that.
Yeah,
perfect.
It is, but it's everything else, mate. I mean, you win a tender, it's great. You lose a tender, it's not so great. But, you know, it's you're in for the long haul. You're going to have some days are going to be better than others, and you just have to have this level of comfort that you're not going with these facilitations. You go nuts if you do.
Yeah, you're not like a bungee rope just going up and.
Yeah, exactly.
I find it interesting because you've been at HWL for 10 years now. Is that correct?
I'm in my 10th there.
Yeah. Wow, what has that been like? That experience from start to finish. Is that the only firm that you've worked for?
No, I shopped around. Shopped around a bit, if I could put it that way. Like most lawyers. Well, firstly, I suppose if you go way back, like everyone else, so I want to be a lawyer. I was clear on that. But like almost everyone, I had no real idea on within the law what I wanted to do. And the days are well gone, and were then, where at a certain level of sophistication, you can't do a whole lot of stuff. I think, you know, there's some brilliant lawyers in the country and the suburbs, and I'd say this with the greatest, it's complementary. It's not derogating or denigrating, but they can do a whole lot of stuff. And 1 minute they're in court, the next minute they're doing a sale of business, then they're writing a will, and that's what their day looks like.
Yeah.
Tapestry's amazing, and there's some outstanding lawyers doing that stuff. But my respectful opinion, having said that, is if you really want to be the best in a given area, you can only do that.
Yeah, okay,
you can't spread yourself thinly enough to be maybe one or two.
Yeah.
And when I say areas, there's certain areas that have sort of some integration or some overlap. So property certainly goes into planning, and it goes into building, and there's insurance and contracts and what have you. But anyway, so I think you've sort of really got to drill down. So I, like almost everyone, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I worked in a general litigation practice and did enough crime to realise that that's not where I wanted to be.
Yes.
And I had this, anyway, I had my path diverge in the yellow wood. It was either going to be building litigation or medical negligence. I went the building route, and pretty quickly I had some building disputes involving owners' corporations, and no one knew what an owners' corporation, well, that body's corporate back then, but no one knew what they were, me included. But I went away and learned. And what ultimately happened was there was no great plan or strategy on my part, but just the way that the cards fell was that there was really only two lawyers specialising in that work, and they were both, very senior and coarse term, but elderly. And anyway, so I sort of, I got in. I had a bit of fortune with timing, and obviously have, done it, a lot of hard work to sort of entrench that position moving forward. So typically the practice of strata and subdivision law wasn't, at least in Victoria, seen as a discrete practice area. It's something that most property lawyers thought they had a handle on. I'm going to suggest to you in this podcast that they're wrong. It is a discrete area. It's a very varied area, but it's discrete, and it goes well beyond, traditional notions of just a property practice. So, so I made my own path, mate.
Oh, beautiful. Because I'm sort of like, I've got friends who work in the legal industry, and obviously they do their JD at whatever university they may, and then they go and do their clerkships, and I guess through that clerkship process, they go, okay, I'm going to go do commercial law. I'm going to do, let's say they might do family law, they might do property development law, whatever industry, so whatever fraction of the law they want to practice in. How would you go about speaking to a young lawyer trying to find their way within their career? Because that's one thing, like so many people have this thing where it's like, yep, I'm a lawyer, I've got this degree. What do you do with it? Like, who are you? You don't really know much. So how would you suggest for them to find their way to the property development industry, or find their way on their own path?
I'd certainly advocate the benefits of the property development industry. I mentioned a moment ago, it's really so varied. If I can use my practice area as an example and a springboard into answering your direct question, it's probably seen as a less sexy area to come and specialise in subdivision property law. It's not. It might be seen as limiting because, if you go into some traditional generic broad area, litigation, commercial property or something, it's probably regarded by these young lawyers as you can still sort of move around a fair bit within that.
Yes.
Whereas I'm
they can just like tread water until they figure it out.
There is certainly a bit of that.
Yeah.
But look, happily, the experience at HWL, what happens right around this time of the year is the trainees are coming up to finishing, and they put down a ranking of priorities in regards to the practice groups they want to go in, and each of the partners that has had a look at them does the same thing. And the matchups are invariably really close. It's pretty rare for there to be a disconnect or a non sequitur between what the expectations were. So I think it sort of resolved itself pretty quickly. But I suppose the other necessary quotient to the question is that if it's going to be, it may be a little bit of trial and error.
Yeah, okay.
And you're not limited. I think, if you get stuck and you spend too long stuck, you will limit yourself, because I think once you're sort of past about 5 years, it's going to get harder to move exponentially each year. But there's nothing wrong with, having a misstep. As I said, I did crime, and some family and all sorts of stuff for a couple of years, but it was broad enough, and then you refine it as you go. But so I suppose that coming full circle to answer your question, the advice would be, if you know what you want to do, go for it. And if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. If you don't know what you want to do, well, give yourself a sufficient sort of palette to have a look around, but make your mind up pretty quick. And then if you find yourself in a position that is disagreeable, don't tread water and stay in too long. Force the change. Have the courage to force the change and go and do it.
Create that dialogue with whoever you work with, or your boss or your mentor, to be able to communicate openly and honestly, to say, okay, this may make me go back one step, but I may take 6, 7, 8 steps forward, which is really important. I wanted to ask you a little bit of a tricky question, and from a legal point of view, I know how you answer it. It's quite tough, but do you work on any complex cases where you have to be very, very mindful of how you go about it, like just from a personal point of view, like within the property development industry? Like, give me an example of a case you've worked on recently that...
That's a good question, without notice, mate. I think, certainly you've got to be careful. I mean, from a liability risk exposure perspective, you're online all the time, and it comes at you from every direction. It comes at you from the other side. It comes from your client's expectations. It comes from your firm expectations. If you're doing anything litigious, you've got the court breathing down your neck. So you're really sort of push and pulled, in all directions. It obviously gets easier the more experienced you get. The more, I would hope, if you've gotten the draftiness to it, but you might find that the law doesn't agree with you. But assuming that it agrees sufficiently that you are going to make a career out of it, then the longer you go, the more confident you become, the better you get, I suppose, based on experience. So,
because I want to, like for example, like me, like I might want to buy a piece of land out in, let's say the western suburbs, like going about getting planning approvals, and obviously local and state government policies that prevent developers from developing in certain areas. So you would represent most of the time the developer going into those cases?
Mate, I've got a pretty varied practice. I don't think I quite spit it out, but when I was saying a moment ago about the strata practice may be seen as limiting because it's special.
Yeah, like literally, it's like you're talking to a dummy right now, and I'm open. Like I have no understanding of how the legal field works within the property development industry, and I think a lot of people pretend that they do, and they'll say, "Yeah, I have an understanding," but most of them talk shit. They don't know.
I reckon that's a fair call, and I think of about what are we up to, 10 or 11 property partners in Melbourne. Now, they're the ones I know the best because it's my home office and it's my department, but each one of us does something markedly and materially different than each other one. So even within property partners within my group, mate, there's stuff that I would never, don't come and talk to me about gake and whatever. As far as, so the subdivision practice is, so you're planning, I sort of come in towards the end of planning. Planning its own discipline. It certainly informs what I do, but it's its own thing. Once the plan of subdivision is pretty ripe, typically, sometimes but typically for developmental work, I'll come in sometime close to when the plan's being lodged. So I'm going to be drafting rules, and I'm going to be putting in place agreements and leases and this sort of stuff. Plan gets registered, Owners Corp comes into operation, so there's a lot of governance then about, meetings and insurance requirements, financial management, repair maintenance obligations, in-house dispute resolution, and then, so that's what I'd call the sort of mid-end, if that's not an oxymoron. And then the back end's litigation, which is obviously disputes. So I cover front end, mid and back end. So it is pretty varied, and mate, it goes from, so it's fundamentally, well, in fact, I'll share this with you.
Please do. I'm like a blank canvas, as they say. So.
Good, mate. Well, so when my practice got a little bit of an identity crisis in the sense that, as I made the comment a moment ago, typically it hasn't been seen as a discrete, bespoke area. My first 2 years at HWL, I was in the lit department.
Okay.
And I was sort of looking at it, I was thinking, these guys spectacularly good at what they do, which are going to be, corporate restructuring and, insolvencies and what have you. And I'm thinking, it's just not me. I mean, I've got the property, the back end component of my practice is significant, so it's contentious, it's litigious, but I'm not really doing what these cats are. So we migrated, 2 years in lit, and migrated across to property. I think that's a better fit because strata practice, subdivision practice is property principles, yet I'm in court more days than I'm not. And then as far as the elements that you're going, that comprise it, building defects.
Yes. So that's probably one of the biggest issues that you face at the moment. Like a lot of your work is around building defects.
It has always been a big part of my practice, but I was almost hoping we wouldn't get into non-compliant flammable cladding in this discussion, mate. But obviously, since all that's been a big part. But a strata practice goes into OH&S and I've got insurer clients, and it's really a big, varied practice. So it's a very specialised area, but it's almost a misnomer because it's the widest specialised area imaginable.
Oh, okay, cool. That's a cool, interesting opinion, or I guess an interesting perspective, as they would say. And do you spend a lot of time at universities? I know we were talking offline a little bit that you give a lot of talks and presentations. Obviously, like you've got fucking so much knowledge in there between those ears, mate. So like, how do you find trying to balance your time? Because I'm sure people would want you, like I have you today, like speaking for an hour and a half, whatever it may be. Do you spend a lot of time speaking at universities and different conferences?
The answer is yes. I do about anywhere between 20 to 30 seminars a year. At last count,
just 20 to 30.
20 to 30. So it's every couple of weeks, mate. It adds up. But there's a pretty even. It's probably a three-way split between sort of where those directed at. I do CPD for lawyers for almost all, if not all, of the providers. So Law Institute, Leo Cousin, Legal Wise, Television Education Network. So that's to lawyers. To the industry, I do a lot. And then as students, probably universities probably less than the other two areas, but I've certainly lectured for University of New South Wales, RMIT, where I was deacon.
Various universities. That's cool.
Yeah.
I actually think I'd love to start lecturing a little bit more at a university level. Obviously, given that I've only been in the industry for a little while, but just giving my own take on my own experience on it. Obviously, if I had someone that came to my university, maybe have given me a different perspective of the career path that I want to go down. Because for me, if I look at me in 10, 20 years time, I particularly want to be doing my own developments in the property development industry to create sustainable communities for future generations. So when I'm it's funny, when I'm at work, most of the times, I'm doing my job. I try to do my job as best as I can, but I'm just researching. That's all I'm doing. I'm researching what's going right, what's going wrong, writing it down, taking notes of all the things that I'm learning. So when I do get the opportunity to do it for myself one day, and wherever that's 10 years or 20 years down the line, is that I've got all that knowledge and got all that information that I can then share with my team or with how we can do things better. So I love that you sort of give back to your field as well, because it's really important.
Mate, that's certainly, I was talking to the girlfriend last night and I use those words, so I'm certainly magnanimous, but I'd hate to sound sort of supercilious. Giving back has this sort of connotation of paternalism.
Yes,
there's an element, but I've got a better way of describing it. I reckon it's close to the same thing, but it's it's humbling for me to be asked that if there's people out there that value my opinion and the way I deliver it sufficiently, they keep asking me to come back. So I'm a 50% mark at least. It appears. Then that's humbling to me, mate.
Yes.
And so giving back, sure, that's an element, but my ego's been stroked a little bit, and I'm doing something right, by ostensibly the basis that,
Yeah, you're just being a good human being at the end of the day.
one tries, one's hardest, mate. Even though they were rat bags when we were younger, we're still good human beings. We just would cheat.
I'll tell you that one. I'm still fire on the cricket field. I'll tell you that.
I'm sure it goes without saying. I haven't congratulated on your premiership. Was it last year or the year before? I think we were Waverley at the port of Mount Waverley.
Mount Waverley. It was 2015-16 cricket season. Yeah,
okay.
It's a little pup. I still like it's such an interesting thing to succeed at something like sports that requires the support of 10 other players in your team, because you have to put so much trust in them to be able to reproduce their skill set at a high level. And one thing I've learned through cricket and coaching and captaining is that I work for my team. My team doesn't work for me. If I give them all the tools and resources and the knowledge and the skills that they need and work with them, they'll succeed. And at the end of the day, people say, oh, you were coach and all that type of stuff. Yes, I was coach, but I was coach within like a really, really motivated team who were willing to learn and who taught me a lot as well. So as leaders, although we might be CEOs or coaches or captains or whatever it is, we work for our team. Our team doesn't work for us. That's how I view it.
I couldn't agree more, mate. There's a symbiosis to it, but I think what you've just said is not divorced from what we were saying a moment ago, that you are humbled to be put in that position of leadership, and you're giving something back because you're appreciative and cognizant of, based on your history. And dude, that's that's how it works, and that's a great thing.
Thanks, appreciate it. So, team, like, in the next 10 years, obviously you've had a very successful career. Where do you see yourself going? Like, what would you like to do? Would you like to maybe open up your own legal practice? What are you going to do? Tell me.
Well, I don't think I can answer that, mate, because...
HWL, please don't listen to this podcast, by the way.
if there was any secret agenda, I wouldn't want it to get out. No, look, there's not...
We'll edit that part out, yeah?
It's a funny question, and because I think the question abounds in an assumption that it's almost like that self-attainment is that the top level is to go and open your own firm, and I don't think it is.
Yep.
I mean, as it stands, and here's the plug for HWL, so I can extinguish Roman's negativity a moment ago, is, I mean, mate, when I got to HWL 9 years ago and a bit, I was about the 127th or 8th partner, I think. We're up to 275, so we've had more than 100% growth in less than a decade. So the firm's doing something right. And, I'm a partner, I'm an equity partner, so, so I do have ownership, along with a whole bunch of other partners. But the benefit, look, there's going to be pros and cons of any model, but I think I'll still be there. And the reason why is that having the support of explaining the sort of how varied the practice is, having the ability to be able to work collegially with other partners that you just can't get when you're out by yourself. I'll give you an example. It's a matter of record, so I can say it, but I was a key partner acting for Mantra's, who now bought by Accor, but Mantra's acquisition of the Art Series Hotel Group a couple of years ago. It was a $53 million deal involving 8 or 9 hotels. I think it was 6 in Victoria, 1 in South Australia, and 2 in Queensland. But so that came to me, and it was very gracious. But by the time that was finished, and we continue to have a good relationship, but that discrete item of work went through about 20 partners, because there's expertises that I was saying to be the best, to be really, really good at something. There can only be 1, maybe 2 things if you outstanding. But so I'm getting contracts done by a commercial partner. Then there's going to be tax implications, and it sort of goes around every way. And as a team player, that suits me. Whereas if you're in your own firm, sorry, and just one more plug for Big Law is the ability to sort of mentor and have engagement with junior people.
Yes.
And hopefully have some positive influence. But more than that, hopefully give them some inspiration. But if you hang up your own shingle, it's going to be attractive for the independence and rolling to work in the thongs unless you've got a client to see. But you're going to be. You might be a bit lonely, but you're certainly not going. I couldn't have taken that mantra job if I was Tim Graham, Strata Lawyers on Glen Huntly Road, Elwood.
I understand.
So I wouldn't necessarily agree that the paradigm or the ultimate goal is your own firm. For me, it's not.
Yeah. So do you have a lot of, as you were mentioning before, you have a lot of support. So HWL obviously provide a really, really good structure for young lawyers or lawyers at any stage within their career to have a really good work-life balance and be able to still succeed whilst managing family life as well. I'm guessing you would have worked with a lot of people who their careers have still progressed significantly, although they have other interests outside work as well.
All law firms say that they ascribe to a work-life balance and flexible working arrangements and all that. I don't know how many of them actually achieve it.
Yes.
What I can only talk to HWL, and what I can say is we take that very, very seriously. It's not just. We live our values. We don't just write them down and say it and stop there.
Yes.
We live them, and we take that very seriously. And KPIs at HWL aren't just what's your practice worth. It goes off into all sorts of things, which is going to be things like leadership and positive influence and development of learning, development of junior people and all that. Those are as important as a KPI as a dollar sign.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought because I've worked with a colleague of yours, Sydney Wong. And she's amazing. She's a really kind, lovely person, always happy to pick up the phone and just have a conversation, obviously in 6-minute increments. No, she's an amazing person. And I feel like that comes out in her work because she's so passionate about it. And she obviously gets that support from, obviously, internal, the powers that be at HWLE. And it's really good to see the organisation flourishing, and doing really, really well. So, Tim, thank you so much for coming on board today and being a part of the Young Developer Podcast. I really appreciate you giving me your time, mate. And I wish you all the best in your future success, and I hope you achieve all the things that you want to.
Mate, Romain, thank you. I'm humbled, and I can only say this is a sign-off. Don't wait 10 or 20 years. Go as soon as you're ready, but best of luck with your developments when you get there, and in the meantime, with your day-to-day stuff, Godspeed and tally-ho, mate.
Thanks, bud. Thanks, Tim.
Too good.
Thanks. Legend.
Well done, mate.